Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The road stretched endlessly under a sky heavy with snow, the cold biting into everything it touched. It was 25 degrees, and the wind howled like a living thing, rattling the bare branches and sweeping drifts of white across the frozen asphalt. Most drivers kept their eyes locked ahead, gripping their steering wheels tightly, eager to escape the bitter night. None of them noticed the shadow standing at the edge of the road. A thin, trembling bear. His fur, once thick and golden brown, was now stiff with frost, clumped with ice and filth. His ribs jutted out beneath his coat, stark against the lean frame that had once been powerful. His dark eyes, hollow from hunger and exhaustion, tracked every vehicle that passed, but he made no move to run, no sign of aggression. He only waited. For what? For someone to stop? For a miracle? For hours he remained there, shivering in the relentless cold. His legs wobbled, breath curling in the frigid air, each exhale weaker than the last. Still, he watched, as though believing that among the streaks of headlights and speeding wheels, someone would see him, truly see him. Then, finally, a truck slowed. Nathaniel Carter, a retired wildlife rescuer, gripped the wheel of his old pickup, his knuckles white. Decades of experience had taught him that nature often demanded patience, but this was unnatural. A bear, standing alone on the side of the highway in the dead of winter. Something was terribly wrong. He eased the truck to the side of the road, his breath fogging against the windshield. His instincts screamed at him. This was dangerous, but something deeper, something unshakable, told him he had no choice. He couldn't just leave this creature to die. Nathaniel turned off the engine and cracked open the door. The cold hit him instantly, slicing through his coat. His boots crunched against the frozen ground as he stepped forward, slow and steady. The bear's ears twitched, acknowledging his presence, but he didn't run. He didn't even growl. He just stared. "Easy there, big guy," Nathaniel murmured, voice barely above the wind's whisper. He took another step. Then another. The bear's breathing was ragged now, his body swaying like a tree, about to fall. Nathaniel's eyes flickered over the bear's frame. Scars, deep, jagged lines cutting through fur and flesh, old wounds, some barely healed, others raw and exposed to the brutal elements. Someone had done this to him. Nathaniel clenched his jaw, anger flickering behind his careful demeanor. Had he escaped a trap? Had he been shot and left for dead? Had he been abandoned? Then, with a sudden exhale, the bear's legs buckled. Nathaniel lunged forward as the great beast crumpled into the snow. Instinct overrode fear. He was moving before he could think, hauling the emergency blanket from his truck, heart hammering as he knelt beside the fallen animal. The bear's breathing was slow, too slow. Nathaniel knew the signs. He'd seen it before in stranded deer, in wounded wolves that wandered too far from safety. The cold was shutting him down. If he didn't act now, it would be too late. "Come on, big guy. You've made it this far," Nathaniel said, voice thick with determination. He draped the thick blanket over the bear, his fingers brushing against the frozen fur. The bear barely stirred. Nathaniel moved quickly, grabbing a small canister from his truck. Warm broth, leftovers from his thermos. He dipped his fingers into the liquid, letting the scent waft through the freezing air. The bear's nose twitched. "That's it. You smell that?" Nathaniel coaxed, gently holding his fingers near the animal's snout. The bear wuffed, a tired sound, but a sound nonetheless, a sign of life. With painstaking patience, Nathaniel coaxed a few sips past the bear's cracked lips, watching as a flicker of awareness returned to those dark, weary eyes. The headlights of passing cars cast long shadows, but none of them stopped. None of them saw the battle unfolding between life and death on the side of the road. Nathaniel refused to give up. Minutes passed, then an hour. The wind howled, biting and merciless. Nathaniel kept talking, his voice steady, reassuring. The bear listened. Then, at last, a small miracle. The bear shifted. It was slight, just a slow attempt to lift his head, but it was something. Nathaniel exhaled, relief crashing over him like a wave. He couldn't leave him here, not like this. He reached for his radio, fingers stiff with cold. "This is Nathaniel Carter. I have a downed bear on Route 17, mile marker 43. He's in bad shape. I need transport and a secure location." The reply came moments later, crackling through the static. "Carter, you're kidding, right? A bear? Do I sound like I'm joking?" Nathaniel snapped, his patience fraying. "We don't have time for disbelief, Mike. Get me a truck. Get me a vet. Now." Silence. Then a heavy sigh. All right. We're sending help. Hang tight." Nathaniel stayed. He wrapped the bear in extra blankets, whispered reassurances, and did the only thing that mattered in that moment. He didn't leave. When the wildlife rescue team arrived, floodlights washing over the snowy roadside, Nathaniel was still there, kneeling beside the bear. Together, they loaded the great animal into the truck, careful, methodical. Nathaniel kept a hand on the bear's side the entire time, feeling the rise and fall of his breath. Shallow, but steady. As the truck rumbled to life, Nathaniel lingered for a moment, watching the bear's dark eyes flicker open once more. There was gratitude there, a silent acknowledgement between two souls, one human, one wild, who had met in the cold, in the darkness, and chosen to trust. The world may have sped past without seeing, without stopping. But Nathaniel saw. And that night, on a frozen roadside, he made all the difference. The freezing wind tore through the barren highway, howling like a living thing. Nathaniel Carter stood beside his truck, his breath turning to mist in the icy air, his muscles burning from the impossible weight of the bear he was trying to support. The creature trembled beneath the emergency blanket, its body swaying dangerously. Nathaniel could feel its ribs beneath his hands, each breath a battle against the cold. He had seen suffering before, had rescued animals on the brink, but nothing had prepared him for this. A dying bear, desperate enough to seek help from humans. The bear shifted, its legs wobbling under its own weight. Nathaniel didn't let go. "Come on, big guy," he murmured, his voice hoarse from the cold. "We can't stay here." The bear's ears twitched, a flicker of awareness in its sunken eyes. It took a step. Slow, unsteady, but a step nonetheless. Nathaniel exhaled sharply. They were running out of time. He needed to get the bear into his truck before the cold claimed them both. He reached for the emergency rope he'd looped loosely around the bear's shoulders, gently applying pressure to guide it forward. The bear resisted at first, its instincts warring with exhaustion, but Nathaniel didn't back down. He pressed his hand against its side, feeling the shallow rise and fall of its breath. "You've made it this far," he coaxed. "Just a little more." Another step, then another. The bear was moving. Nathaniel backed toward the truck, pulling the door open with one hand. The interior was warm, a stark contrast to the merciless cold outside. But how was he supposed to get the bear inside? The creature was massive, even in its weakened state. He needed a new plan, fast. The bear's head lifted slightly, eyes darting toward the warmth. He was exhausted, but he understood. He wanted to live. That was enough for Nathaniel. Summoning every ounce of strength he had left, he positioned himself behind the bear, using his body as a brace, coaxing it forward. "That's it," he breathed. "Just a little more." The bear took a shaky step onto the truck's floorboard. The metal groaned beneath its weight. Nathaniel didn't stop, didn't give it a chance to second guess. He pushed, his entire body straining, and with one final lurch, the bear collapsed into the passenger seat. Nathaniel sagged against the door, his breath coming in heavy bursts. He had done it. He had actually done it. The bear let out a soft, exhausted huff, its body curling slightly as the warmth began to seep into its frozen bones. Nathaniel climbed into the driver's seat, ignoring the icy sting in his fingers as he turned the ignition. The truck rumbled to life, and he pulled back onto the road, heading toward the nearest wildlife rehabilitation center. The journey was silent except for the occasional deep breath from the bear. Nathaniel glanced over, watching as its eyes slowly drifted shut, not in defeat, but in something closer to peace. "You're gonna be okay," Nathaniel said softly, gripping the wheel tighter. "You held on long enough for someone to see you. That means something." The bear didn't respond, but it didn't need to. For the first time in what must have felt like forever, it was safe. And that was enough. The snow-covered highway stretched endlessly under a sky heavy with frost, the temperature plummeting to a brutal 25 degrees. The wind howled through the desolate landscape, slicing through the air like invisible daggers. Most drivers sped past, their headlights cutting through the misty darkness, their minds occupied with the urgency of reaching somewhere warm. But none of them noticed the lone figure standing near the road, waiting, watching. Nathaniel Carter had been a ranger for nearly 15 years, but he had never seen anything like this. At first, he had thought it was just another mound of snow or a fallen tree. But as he drove closer, his breath hitched in his throat. It was a bear, a grizzly, thin and weak, barely standing. His fur was stiff with frost, his ribs visible beneath the matted coat. But what struck Nathaniel the most weren't the bear's injuries or his ragged appearance. It was his eyes. The bear wasn't wild with fear or aggression. He wasn't snarling or trying to flee. He was waiting. Nathaniel gripped the wheel, torn between instinct and logic. Every part of him screamed that stopping was dangerous, but then the bear took a step forward, wobbling, barely holding himself up. His body swayed, and then he collapsed. Nathaniel didn't think. He slammed the brakes, barely registering the truck skidding on the icy road. Heart hammering, he grabbed an emergency blanket and jumped out into the biting cold. The bear was still breathing, but barely. Nathaniel crouched, moving slowly, every motion careful and deliberate. "Hey, buddy," he murmured, the wind nearly swallowing his voice. "I'm here to help." The bear didn't react, only shivered violently, his breath coming in weak puffs. Nathaniel knew he was running out of time. Hypothermia was setting in. He needed to move him, needed to get him out of the cold. He ran back to his truck, grabbing a tarp and rope. He wasn't sure how he'd do it, but he had to try. The bear, too weak to fight, barely reacted as Nathaniel gently positioned the tarp underneath him. With every ounce of strength he pulled, using the rope to create a makeshift sled, guiding the bear toward the truck. Every pull sent fire through his muscles, every second stretching into eternity. But step by agonizing step, he got him there. Then came the hardest part, lifting him. Nathaniel braced himself, digging his boots into the ice. He heaved, gritting his teeth, his muscles straining under the bear's weight. For a moment, it seemed impossible. Then, with one final desperate effort, the bear slid into the truck bed. Nathaniel gasped for air, his body trembling from exertion. But there was no time to rest. He jumped into the driver's seat, his fingers numb as he turned the key. The truck roared to life. "Hold on, big guy," he whispered, flooring the gas. "We're getting you out of here." The drive was a blur. The nearest wildlife rehabilitation center was an hour away. An eternity in these conditions. He grabbed his radio, his voice urgent. "Yukon Wildlife Rescue. This is Ranger Nathaniel Carter. I have a critical case, a grizzly hypothermic, severe malnourishment, ETA 50 minutes. The response was immediate. "We're preparing now." "Drive safe, Carter." Safe? That was impossible. The roads were treacherous, black ice lurking beneath fresh snow. He gritted his teeth, pushing the truck as fast as he dared. Then the worst happened. The bear stopped breathing. Nathaniel's stomach lurched. No, not now. Not when they were this close. He slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a stop. Without hesitation, He threw open the door and ran to the back. The bear's body was frighteningly still, his breath no longer visible in the frigid air. "No, no, no!" Nathaniel's heart pounded. He ripped off his own jacket, throwing it over the bear. "Stay with me, big guy." His hands, now bare against the freezing wind, pressed against the bear's chest. It was a stupid idea, reckless even, but he didn't care. If he could transfer even a fraction of his own warmth, then a twitch. Nathaniel held his breath. Another twitch, a shudder, then a rattling gasp. Relief hit him so hard he nearly collapsed. The bear was still alive. He scrambled back into the truck, his entire body shaking from the cold and adrenaline, one hand on the wheel, the other gripping his radio. "He's still breathing," he said hoarsely, "but barely." "Keep driving," came the urgent reply. "We're waiting for you." The next 40 minutes felt like a lifetime. But then, finally, headlights appeared in the distance. The wildlife rescue team. As soon as Nathaniel pulled in, the team was there, unloading the bear, assessing his condition, moving swiftly. Nathaniel stumbled out of the truck, exhausted, watching as they worked. A vet approached him. "You did good," she said. "You got him here just in time. Will he make it?" Nathaniel's voice was hoarse. The vet glanced at the bear, who now lay on a heated mat, wrapped in thermal blankets. "He's strong. He fought to survive." That means something. Nathaniel let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He looked at the bear. His bear. The one who had waited by the road, trusting that someone would stop. "You're safe now," he whispered. And for the first time that night he allowed himself to believe it. Nathaniel Carter's breath turned to ice in the frigid air as the weight of Dr. Monroe's words settled over him. The bear, this frail, suffering creature he had fought to save, hadn't wandered into the cold wilderness by accident. He had been cast aside, a life deemed worthless by the very people who should have cared for him. His fists clenched as he stared at the photo. The same sorrowful eyes, the same matted fur. Nathaniel had spent years rescuing animals from natural disasters, poachers, and careless drivers. But this was cruelty on an entirely different level. "He survived this long," Dr. Monroe said quietly, pulling him from his spiraling thoughts. "That means he's a fighter. He still has a chance." Nathaniel nodded slowly, exhaling a shaky breath. The bear had made it through the freezing night, through the harrowing journey, and now he was here. He wasn't going to let him die now. For the next few days, the rescue team worked tirelessly. Vets monitored his condition around the clock, treating frostbite, infections, and severe dehydration. His body was weak, his muscles atrophied from months of malnutrition, but there was progress. Slow but real. Nathaniel barely left his side. He slept in a chair beside the enclosure, waking at every subtle sound, watching every labored breath. Then, on the 5th night, it happened. A soft sound, a low, rumbling vibration. Nathaniel's head shot up, his pulse spiking. He leaned closer. The bear, his bear, was purring. It was a deep, throaty hum, faint but unmistakable. Nathaniel had worked with wild animals long enough to know what it meant. Not just contentment, but trust. Nathaniel let out a shaky laugh, rubbing a hand over his face. "You're full of surprises, aren't you, big guy?" Dr. Monroe, who had just stepped in for her rounds, froze mid-step. "Is he purring?" Nathaniel confirmed, his voice thick with something he couldn't quite place. Relief, joy, maybe both. She smiled, nodding. "He knows he's safe." For the first time in weeks, Nathaniel let himself believe the bear was going to make it. And he did. The days turned into weeks, and the bear, now officially named Kodiak, or just Coda for short, grew stronger. His fur regained its thick, healthy sheen. His ribs no longer jutted out like a ghost of starvation. He still limped from an old injury, but his strength was returning. Then came the day Nathaniel had been dreading. The discussion about his future. "We have 2 options," Dr. Monroe explained. A sanctuary where he'll be safe but never truly free, or we prepare him for release. Nathaniel knew the decision wasn't his alone, but he also knew Coda wasn't meant to live behind fences, even if they were built for his safety. So, the real work began. Rehabilitation was slow. Coda had to relearn how to fend for himself. They introduced him to a large enclosed wilderness, where he could hunt, forage, and regain his instincts. The first few times, he struggled and Nathaniel worried they'd made the wrong choice. But then, one evening, something changed. Nathaniel stood outside the enclosure, watching as Coda sniffed the air, his body still but alert. Then, in a blur of motion, he pounced. A snowshoe hare, fast but not fast enough, disappeared beneath his massive paws. Nathaniel felt something tighten in his chest. Not sadness, not loss. Pride. Coda was ready. The final day arrived under a cold, gray sky. The team had selected a protected reserve, far from human interference, where he would have the best chance of survival. Nathaniel drove him there himself. The trip was silent, save for the occasional huff from the back. Nathaniel glanced at him through the mirror. "Last ride together, buddy." Coda blinked slowly. His large body curled comfortably in the trailer. They reached the site just as the sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the frozen landscape. Nathaniel climbed into the trailer, his breath unsteady. He crouched beside Coda one last time, pressing a hand to the thick fur between his ears. "You've got this," he murmured. "No more cages, no more chains, you're free now." Coda rumbled. A deep, steady sound that Nathaniel swore was his way of saying, "Thank you." Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, Coda rose. His powerful legs stretched beneath him, his fur rippling in the crisp air. The moment the door opened, he hesitated only briefly before stepping onto the untouched snow. He didn't run. He didn't look back. He simply walked, each step stronger than the last. And then he was gone, disappearing into the vast wilderness, where he had always belonged. Nathaniel stood there long after the bear had vanished. He had saved many animals in his life. Some had been quick rescues, others long battles. But Coda had changed something in him. He had reminded him that survival wasn't just about strength. It was about resilience, about trust, about the undeniable will to live, even when the world had given up on you. Nathaniel turned back toward his truck, exhaling one last deep breath. He knew, without a doubt, that Coda was out there, thriving, and that was all that mattered. Nathaniel Carter stood motionless, his breath hanging in the crisp morning air as he watched the bear at the edge of the sanctuary. Strong now, whole again. The once frail creature that had been left to die on a frozen highway was unrecognizable. His fur had regained its thickness. His wounds had healed, and the haunted look in his eyes had been replaced with something fierce, something free. Dr. Monroe stepped beside him, arms folded. "We need to decide," she said softly. "Is he ready?" Nathaniel swallowed hard. The question had haunted him for weeks. The wild was this bear's home, but could he survive there after everything? After captivity, after starvation, after learning to trust humans? His body was strong, but the world outside these walls was unforgiving. "If we keep him here, he'll be protected," Nathaniel murmured, more to himself than anyone else. Dr. Monroe nodded. "But if we keep him here, we take away what he was meant to be." The bear let out a low huff, his breath visible in the cold air as he sniffed the wind. Nathaniel could see it in his posture. He was waiting, sensing something beyond the fence line, something calling him home. The wilderness, the life stolen from him. Nathaniel's gut clenched. He had spent weeks nursing this bear back from the brink of death. He had seen the light return to his eyes, had sat beside him on long nights whispering words of encouragement as if the bear could understand. And maybe, in some way, he had. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about freedom. Nathaniel exhaled and turned to Dr. Monroe. "Let's do it." She gave him a small, knowing smile. "Then let's give him the send-off he deserves." The team worked quickly, preparing for the release. The gate to the reserve was opened, leading into miles of protected wilderness where no cages, no chains, no cruelty could touch him. Nathaniel took a slow step forward and met the bear's eyes one last time. "You're free now, big guy." The bear hesitated, looking at Nathaniel for a long, heavy moment. And then, without another glance back, he turned and walked. Slow at first, then faster, his powerful muscles rippling beneath thick fur as he disappeared into the trees. Nathaniel stood there long after the bear was gone, his chest tight, his throat thick. He had saved many animals in his life, but this one had saved a part of him too. In many ways, the story of Nathaniel Carter and the rescued bear reflects the challenges and choices we face in life. It is a story of survival, compassion, and ultimately, the courage to let go. Whether it's in our relationships, careers, or personal growth, we often find ourselves holding on to things or people, believing that we are protecting them. But just like Nathaniel had to make the difficult decision to release the bear, we too must recognize when it's time to step back and allow others, or even ourselves, to embrace the freedom of change. Life is filled with moments where we are called to help others. It might be a struggling friend, a family member going through hardship, or even a stranger in need of kindness. At times, we may pour our energy, time, and emotions into guiding and supporting someone through their darkest hours. Just as Nathaniel did for the bear, we nurture, we heal, and we fight alongside them. But the true test of compassion is not just in the rescue. It's in knowing when to let go. Often, we become so attached to our roles as protectors or caregivers that we forget the ultimate goal: helping someone regain their strength so they can stand on their own. The bear's journey from captivity to freedom is symbolic of the transformations we all go through. Many of us experience moments in life where we feel trapped by fear, by doubt, by circumstances beyond our control. Like the bear, we may struggle, barely surviving, waiting for someone or something to pull us out of our hardships. And when that help finally arrives, it takes time to heal, to trust again, and to build the strength needed to move forward. Whether it's recovering from heartbreak, overcoming failures, or finding purpose after loss, healing is a process that requires patience, both from ourselves and from those who support us. But perhaps the most profound lesson in the story is understanding that love and kindness should not come with conditions. Nathaniel didn't save the bear expecting gratitude or loyalty. He did it because it was the right thing to do. True compassion is about lifting others up without expecting them to stay, without needing them to owe us something in return. In life, we must learn to give without possession, to help without control, and to love without restriction. When the bear paused and looked back at Nathaniel before disappearing into the wild, it was a moment of unspoken gratitude, a silent acknowledgement that their paths had crossed for a reason. In life, we may never always receive recognition for the kindness we show, but that doesn't make it any less meaningful. The impact we have on others, the second chances we offer, the encouragement we provide, lives on, even when our roles in their stories come to an end. At the heart of this tale is the reminder that the greatest gift we can offer anyone is the freedom to become who they were meant to be. Whether it's a wild animal returning to nature or a loved one finding their own path, true compassion lies not in holding on, but in letting go. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story moved you, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring stories of resilience, hope, and the unbreakable spirit of life. See you in the next story.